Wheel Breakus Cora, Aaron Galusha. I'm here with Luke Eastwood, Druid and author of the Druid's Primer, who has agreed to do an interview in his own home. So thanks very much, and thanks for having me.
You're welcome.
I'll start with a few questions there for you. Samhain and modern celebrations. How do you think modern Halloween celebrations reflect or diverge from the original spirit of Samhain?
Well, that's an interesting question. So, I mean, what is the original spirit of Samhain? That's something is very much open to interpretation, because we can't actually say there's a definitive answer to that. I think, because we're not, there's not like some record from pre-Christian times that will explain exactly what Samhain is and what it's about and what it means. The texts we've got all date from the early Christian period and after that. Although the mythology is referring to obviously pre-Christian times, it was written down sort of late, and of course there's a lot of folk traditions which are passed down, but then we don't know how much they've been altered by time and sort of Christian influence. So to be honest, I'd say we can only really guess what the spirit of Samhain is, to be honest, because without the time machine to hand, you really can't really know. I think we know what the core elements of what it's about are. That it's about the ancestors, it's about death, it's about transition, about the cycle of the year. And all those things are true, and it's one of the 8 important festivals which are marked with a bonfire. Samhain's obviously the one that has the greatest links to fire, but in truth they all had a fire. But that is one tradition that's persisted particularly. So we know the core elements of it, but if you could go back in time and talk to someone, obviously old Irish it would be, you'd have to talk to them in that, or they wouldn't understand you, and say, well, what's this all about, what does it mean? They might, if you talk to a druid or a ruler, or even just an everyday ordinary person, what they'd have to say about what Samhain's about and what it means might be quite different from what we've pieced together from the literature and the folk traditions that are still around. And that's a bit of a vague answer, but the thing is, I think to be accurate is impossible, really, because we've sort of reconstructed something out of the pieces of the past, so it's an incomplete picture.
And that's the reason why we always add in to create the whole jigsaw for ourselves.
Yeah, we fill in the missing pieces in the context of now and what we think it should be, but obviously we're here now in the modern era, in the sort of like late Christian, or even you could say almost a post-Christian era now in Ireland. So we're kind of harking back to something that was pretty much dead by around 800. The last pagan graves date to around 800 AD in Ireland. So those traditions may have carried on, obviously, but in somewhat mutated form. So they're not. I'm sure they're not the same as the original rites and the original practices around Samhain, and the beliefs may have changed a bit. Wouldn't it be great if we did have an actual rite from, I don't know, 2,000 years ago or something that we could refer to, but the fact is we don't have such a thing. And maybe such things were never written down. But there is a fallacy about things being completely oral. The Irish, more than one Irish annal refers to pagan books. I think it was the Annals of the Four Masters mentions that Cormac MacArt ordered all the knowledge of the country to be written down in books. And then in another annal, I forget which one that is, it mentions St. Patrick burning over 400 books, which were obviously pagan.
And that would be in the breastplate, would it? Which was after...
It's not in that poem, but it's in some of, most of these entries are quite short, there's so-and-so, like something like the death of Jesus, or an emperor doing something. It might have one line about a massive event in history, and then other things which are like more local, some bishops or something, there'd be like a whole page on some obscure, what's now an obscure bishop. So, there was mention, I think it was only like a little paragraph that mentions about Patrick ordering all these books to be burned. So, if there were any books about Druid rites or like religious rites of the time, I'd imagine they would have been burned. So, if there was anything, it's lost. Either way, either it didn't exist and it was all in the minds of, in the memory, or if it was written down, it's obviously gone. So I guess that just leaves us having to try and interpret it the best we can,
Druidic practices. In the Druid's Primer, you detail many aspects of Druidic life and deep rituals. Which practices do you feel are more relevant to people today?
Well, I think probably the thing that comes across to me from what people seem to be interested in is, I suppose, what is now called the Wheel of the Year. I mean, that's very much a modern term. I do think the ancients had a sort of concept of the year, in the agrarian year, the solar year, that they followed very much, but I think the way we celebrate it and describe it now obviously is very modern, and those ideas have come back in the modern era sort of through the modern Druid movement, through Wicca and various other forms of paganism. But I mean, the evidence of it being there in the past is very clear, but it's sort of whether it was viewed in the same concept as like a whole, as sort of in a sort of homogeneous way, I can't say that. But I think in a modern context, a lot of people, they want to have rights, they want to have something that they can do. So roughly every 6 weeks you've got a different event going through the year. So you've got the 8 festivals, and I think that's probably the thing that I'd say ordinary pagans would be most interested to participate in. Of course, you've got a very strange situation with modern paganism in that so many people, when they become pagans, they want to be in the priestly class. I just think it's a bit bizarre that a sort of form of spirituality where everyone wants to be a cardinal or a bishop, it's odd, so I mean there are of course people who just want to be lay people, they're no interest in training or becoming priesthood, but I would say neo-paganism is kind of uniquely bizarre in that there's this kind of not just sort of Gnosticism and the desire to progress yourself spiritually, but to actually become like formally a priest or a priestess or a hierophant or whatever, something with a title. I likened it almost to some people I was talking to about going to mass, and like half or more of the congregation are all like sort of monsignors and bishops and deacons and cardinals, and that's just a weird situation. I suppose ideally really you shouldn't need any priesthood at all, that everyone can do for themselves. I'm very much into Gnosticism as a way of thinking, But maybe if we're all going to be able to look after our own spiritual needs ourselves, perhaps we don't need all these silly titles and hierarchies and all that kind of thing. So I'm getting away from the question a bit there, but I think there's certainly a desire on a lot of people's parts to learn to take responsibility for their own spiritual life, and that can involve like getting a title and doing a training course, or a bunch of training courses over years even, but there's no reason why it has to. I mean, in terms of spirit or God or deity, whatever, I don't think you get like a merit badge from God or the gods for having done a 7 or 10 year or training course, or a 1 week training course or whatever. I don't think it works like that at all. But there's certainly a lot of people seem to be interested in that idea, and of course there's a lot of money to be made in training people as well. So I think it's maybe unique to the modern world, and that neo-paganism has come back in this time, which is a very commercial era, and we've got all these modern opportunities which can then be marketed across the internet and whatever. Back in the day, if you found a teacher, you might have to clean their house, cook their food, whatever, pay them something, sort of some kind of quid pro quo arrangement where they teach you over whatever might be years, and you do something for them, like an apprentice who's like has to work the garden, clean the house, whatever, in order to pay for their teaching. Whereas now it generally doesn't work like that. So yeah, those are the two things I think are a really big thing in the modern era. It's like the festivals and participating in that, and then this whole idea of like learning or acquiring of knowledge. That's a really big thing, and I think it's, from my perspective, it's quite troubled, that whole area of learning, because it's a minefield, because it's very easy to sort of have very little integrity in that area, because I think the money changes things to a large extent. So what you're going to do, what you're prepared to do, may be somewhat different, because if you're relying on this as your sole income, teaching people, then you might not turn away someone who's totally unsuitable because you need the money, or you're charging X amount because you need the money. I think in an ideal world you wouldn't have to charge anybody anything, and they may be some kind of exchange of money in terms of time and effort, rather than like hand over €50 or €100, or a weekend could cost you €2, €3, €4, €500. And of course, there's a problem there, and not everyone can afford all this. It's all very well if you've got a lot of money, you can go and do infinite number of training courses. But if you're not wealthy, or rather if you're very low income, then you can be sort of excluded from a lot of modern paganism, because you just don't have the funds to participate in a lot of what's happening, which I think is kind of tragic.
Pagan Ireland Magazine. What inspired you to create Pagan Ireland Magazine, and what vision do you have for its future?
Well, I used to write for a bunch of pagan magazines in the past, particularly Bridget's Fire. I always thought that was a great magazine, but unfortunately it came to an end, and there was nothing for quite some time. And I thought, well, wouldn't it be nice to do something? I think there was Hermit's Journal was, I think, going shortly before, but again, that's gone now. Sean Fitzgerald, the artist, worked on that with a couple of other people. I think he did the layout and illustration. Beautiful work. He does absolutely amazing stuff. In fact, he's done some covers for Pagan Ireland as well. I think he's done 2 so far, and they're both really excellent. But anyway, so unfortunately that, for whatever reasons, I'm not really sure why, that ended. Before that there's been a whole bunch. I think there's about at least 8 pagan magazines since 2000 that have started and ended. I think the longest running is Bridget's Fire, because I knew the people that started it and then the people who took it over. In fact, the latest one has got an interview with Al Cowan, who was co-editor, I think, of Bridget's Fire for a number of years. So I was delighted to get him to do an interview. So I just felt there very much was a need for something, because what happened, someone started a magazine, it would just do 1 or 2 issues and then disappear, or it runs for a couple of years and then disappears. Very much a similar way with a lot of sort of teaching, where somebody's around for a while and then they stopped for whatever reason. Sort of like mini schools, and then they're gone. Which is a bit of a shame. I mean, not saying like Pagan Ireland's going to become like an institution or something that's going to be there forever, but I would hope that I can keep doing it for however many years I can do it. It's been going for 4 years. If it can keep going for 10 or 15, it'd be brilliant. And eventually I'd like to hand it over to someone else who's a bit younger maybe, who can keep it going long term in the way that I suppose another model that's inspired me would be Pagan Dawn in the UK. That's been going a very long time. So, I looked at the format of Bridget's Fire and the Pagan Dawn and sort of borrowed from their ideas. And I thought as well, there'd never been like a professionally put together magazine that was like really high quality. So I decided this would be full colour, because all the previous ones have all been black and white magazines. And some of them would have been good, but we're in we're in the modern age. This is the 21st century. I thought, wouldn't it be much nicer and more attractive? And of course that can be done in print and digital now. So I mean, we don't do a massive run of print stuff. That's expensive anyway, because it's all done on recycled paper. So it costs more than a regular magazine would be, but I suppose that the bigger thing is the digital, and that that's colour as well, of course, and it costs no more to do it in colour. So the whole thing's done in colour, and I'm very happy with how it's developed over time, and I've been very, very lucky, because I don't actually write that much myself for it. I do the editorial and the end piece, and I usually do the environment page. I have a few people help with stories for that. But 95% of the magazine is coming from pagans who are either living in Ireland or connected with Ireland in some way. And I had hoped to pay everyone originally, but it just isn't, unfortunately, not really possible to keep the magazine running and pay everyone. But so really, people are giving their voluntary contributions. I think I will pay people for doing front cover still. That's the only thing I can afford to do. But I mean, the long term, if it gets bigger and bigger, I would like to return to that original idea of paying people for their contributions as well as giving them the magazine, because journalism is become strange, and that it used to be something people were well paid for, but it's changed so much that there's a lot of people out there, including myself, who just write for free because there's just no money in it anymore to pay people, which is kind of sad, really, because when you've gone to a lot of effort, say, to write 1,000, 2,000, 3,000 words on something, and then you don't get paid. It just seems unfair to me, really. But I suppose what people now say is, well, you get free publicity, your name's out there in the internet for everybody to see, and so I suppose that has become what is the modern form of payment, is exposure in social media and all that kind of thing. But I mean, as much as possible, I'm focused on the content of the magazine. As editor, I have final say about what's in it, and from the beginning I decided to stay away from advertising-led model, because I've seen one or two particular magazines which are completely funded by advertising, and I have to say I really don't like the editorial content, because it's all derived from the advertising, or most of it is. And really, when you're kind of held over a barrel when you're relying on your advertisers to fund the magazine, because they say jump and you have to say, well, how high do you want me to jump?
Yeah.
Whereas because it's subscription based, I can just veto anything I think is inappropriate or not good or whatever. I don't have to make any compromises, and I figured the best way to go about it was to try and have the highest quality content editorially as possible, and also not to pitch everything at the lowest level. There's a tendency towards to go really, really low with the kind of, I suppose, the level of understanding or knowledge, as if everybody's a beginner. But I mean, I remember when I was a beginner, I wanted to know about, things that were more advanced. I didn't want to be reading and learning the basics forever and all of the time about everything. So I don't think there's any need to pitch everything at this really low level. You can go a bit higher, and people will adapt. They will very quickly sort of get up to speed on sort of things that are a bit more advanced, given the opportunity. Because I mean, you can find the basics on Google or whatever. It's all over the internet. The really basic stuff there's like a million websites or whatever that go over the really basic stuff, and books that go over that. So I think with the magazine I've tried to push it a little bit higher, and if I was relying on advertising, I probably wouldn't be able to do that, because they say they want this and that content. So in a way, having a subscription model gives you a lot more freedom to steer the magazine in the direction we want to go. So really, I would like to add more pages eventually, just to sort of just continue the way it's going, but maybe a few new sections in time. It is growing bit by bit all the time, organically growing slowly. So, I added extra 4 pages early on, and then I'd love to add another 4 pages going forward. But of course, that puts the printing cost up. So, I just think baby steps. I think one of the things is, if you try to grow too fast, it can actually kill things off. So I'm not pushing it too hard. I just let it move forward, and when the time's right, I'll add extra sections, and we'll just keep on going, I suppose, and hopefully it'll continue to grow in the coming years. And hopefully when I get too old or too sick of doing it, I'll find someone else to take it over and keep it going, you know.
Connection to the land. How important is the Irish landscape and its ancient sites to your work and understanding of Druidry?
Yeah, very important, I'd say. I first started Druidism, or studying it, however, when I was living in London, and I felt very aware of sort of, I suppose, the weakness of the energy of the land, how corrupted it is by, I suppose, modern human life, you know, all the pollution, the dirt. You know, I'd walk around in the city and you'd see like patches of wasteland, and you'd see, one thing I'd see was like the buddleia, the butterfly bush. They're popping up all over there, all over the place in London, and they'd be growing in rubble and through concrete and stuff. And you sometimes see, you know, trees and bushes where they've popped up and they might be a bit distorted and warped because they're struggling to like break through in weird places and can't get to the light properly and this and that. And so you could see nature is trying to thrive in these sterile, horrible environments. And you know, I'd get out of London and suddenly the energy's somewhere different, totally different. But then I would say the energy in Ireland, which is where I've studied most of my Druidry, I moved here in 1999, so it was just a small number, like probably about 4 years of in the UK where I was sort of beginning to sort of learn about it. The bulk of my practice and learning has been here in this country. I noticed immediately a difference in the energy of the land, of the sacred sites here. It just seems a lot more powerful. I think maybe because there's less people. You think of somewhere like Stonehenge, it's just flooded with visitors all year round. Just like constant flow of all this human energy, and not always respectful energy either. And I think that kind of causes the energy of these places to sort of shrink into itself, because it's sort of not really compatible with this sort of tourism kind of thing. That's not what they were created for. And you go to a site that's not visited very often. There's one around here that nobody goes to. It's like forgotten, pretty much. Sure, it's beyond old maps and stuff, but no one goes there. Just like the birds and the sheep and whatever. And you know, I go to that place and places like it. The energy of the land is quite shocking, stunning even would be a word. So I think there's something special about this country, and in the I suppose that energy's there everywhere across the whole planet. Obviously, it's not unique to Ireland, but I think because of the sort of small volume of people and areas of the country where, you know, the volume of people and the way they interact it's so low, so small, so low, that these places haven't become stilted or polluted in the way that like they could do in other countries where, you know, they built big concrete things and whatever. You know, there could be like a supermarket built right next to a ancient site in, I don't know, somewhere like Germany or France or UK or whatever. That hasn't tended to happen so much here. There are a few examples. Like in Kenmare, there's a stonecircle there which was on the edge of an industrial zone, and it was quite sad, the stonecircle there. But what they've done in recent years is they've got rid of all that and returned the land more to its natural form, got rid of all the crap, if you like. Although it's still surrounded by a ring of conifers, so you can't see the sun. Which that's one oversight that they haven't dealt with, because obviously that wouldn't have been there back in the day. And
similar to what you said in Limerick, the stonecircle there, Lars from Ireland, that the sun is actually blocked by the trees that are growing down. Grange. Yeah, that's Grange,
an amazing circle there. But again, the sunrise there on the summer solstice, you can't actually really see it properly because sort of modern, again, they're tall conifers, a little bit back, but close enough that it does completely, more or less, block the sun. So, I mean, if you look at where these places were built, obviously they're pre-Druidic, really, most of them, or they usually set on a height or in a particular spot, where there will be a visible sunrise or sunset or an alignment, like on the Dingle Peninsula you've got the stones that align with the sunset as it rolls. So it looks like it's rolling down the hill and then goes into the sea, and then the light, if it's there, will kind of create a shaft that hits this alignment. So it was all very purposefully done, and probably it's all picked with energy lines or nodes, or ley lines, I suppose is the term that we use now. So it's all quite specific, and obviously if you've a site that's aligned to the sun, then that they would have probably made sure that there weren't a bunch of trees blocking the view. Whereas now they're not, modern thinking of like the local council or whatever, they're not even concerned about, oh gosh, no one's going to be able to see the solstice sunrise or the solstice sunset or whatever it is. Because I don't know if everyone knows this, but you tend to get a difference east to west coast. Obviously here on the west, sunrises are more difficult to see. If you're on the east coast, it tends to be more aligned to sunrises, and here on the west you've got a lot of sunset aligned sites, which makes perfect sense. But like when I first came to Ireland, I wasn't aware of that. It took time visiting all these places. I've been to every county in Ireland over a large number of years, so I've got to see a hell of a lot of places, and then you kind of, I suppose it gives you more of a context of what it's all about and what these people were trying to do by going to many different places. I think it gives you a better, I don't think you can ever fully understand what they were about and what they were doing, but I think it gives you a much better understanding to go and see many different places and connect with them.
Cultural revival. How do you see modern paganism contributing to the revival and preservation of Irish culture and language?
Yeah, that's an interesting one. I think there is an element of that. There are certain people who are very much pushing sort of that connection. Not all of them would be on the same page. I know for a fact that Celtic Druid Temple, Con Connor, he'd be very into using the language. I think he's now completely fluent, and they would use the Irish, they took Tócascóga in a lot of their ceremonies. In fact, all of them they would, and they'd have both languages. A lot of it would be in Irish. And there's other people as well, very different person, but again, very much interested in in the language would be Deirdre Wadding, and she's got her own school down in Wexford. So she's done quite a lot of workshops in trying to teach people how to do basic ritual Ascoga, which is very, very good, very useful. So, you know, I have to applaud her for that. You know, it is important. I think it does change how things work, how you feel, to use the Irish language. I got pretty poor Irish. I'm only like the standard of a 4 or 5 year old, to be honest. You know, I understand the basics, but you know, when people talk quickly or talk about, you know, anything with any complexity, I struggle a lot, you know, or I fail to understand completely. But you know, I've learned to use a limited vocabulary in ritual, and I think it does make a difference. And of course, it's part of the original Druidism here. Of course, would have been Ascoga. Everything would have been in Irish. I'm sure really it's up until like really the post-famine period that everyone switched to English. So, you know, even masses and whatever people were doing up until that point would have all been in the Irish language. So what else? They now think people have been here for a lot longer than previously thought, maybe 10,000 years. This is obviously maybe people didn't speak Irish back in 10,000 years ago or whatever it may. We don't know when Irish came here, but did it come with the Gaels? Did it come with the Tuatha De Danann, or even before that? Maybe
yeah.
You know. So, but for as far back as anyone knows, the language of this island has been Irish. So, I think it's important to at least make some attempts to use it. It would be great if everyone was using it all the time, but I suppose realistically, given that it's like the everyday working language here has been English for a long time.
About 150 years at least.
Yeah, 150 odd years. That's nothing in the history of this country, but that's how it is at the moment, and without changing sort of all the institutions and education system, it's going to stay that way. Someone did say to me, I remember talking about the whole subject of the revolution and you know, the War of Independence. Once that agreement was made in 1921, for some reason the new kind of you know, the Free State government decided to keep the civil service and everything running in English. I suppose a lot of the people who were working in that didn't really speak Irish. And I can't remember who was saying that, but they said, look, if they just sort of outlawed English as the main language, or not banned it, but just said, right, everything, all the newspapers are going to be in Irish only, all the civil service in Irish only, the road signs in Irish only, everything, it would have been really tough for like 5 years perhaps, while everyone like tried to get up to speed. But we'd all be speaking Ascoga now, everyone, and that would be the way it is. And if you look at like somewhere like Poland, they've had tremendously difficult history, even worse than Ireland, but you could argue much worse in a way, in that they didn't even exist for some time, but they've kept their language. And then all the people from Poland here, they're all bilingual. They know their own language, but they also speak English, and some of them are trilingual. They've learned Irish as well,
especially the younger generations.
Yeah, so they can speak Polish as their first language, they can speak English perfectly, and they can speak Irish as well. So it can be done. I mean, that's a nation that was ripped between Germany and Russia, and literally was non-existent for, I think, over 100 years. It was absorbed, and then it managed, I don't know the full history of how they managed to get their nation back as one country, and then they had all the trauma of World War II, and having to really rebuild a flattened country, and all the horrors of the ghetto and the camps and all that stuff. And Poland's still here. They still have their culture. They still have their language. So I think maybe Ireland could learn a lot from the Polish experience in terms of like keeping its language alive.
For pagans in Ireland, what are the biggest challenges facing the pagan community in Ireland today?
Ooh, that's a bit of a tough one. I think it kind of goes back to what I was saying a bit about sort of clergy and training and all this kind of stuff. I'm a pagan, but I have an interest in religion in general, in all kinds of different parts. And I was very fortunate in being able to go to Japan, and I was very interested in Shinto, which is the Japanese paganism. So I found out a lot more about it while I was there and visited a lot of temples and what have you. And that's had a revival as well, but that's a lot older in terms of the revival. Again, that's a really ancient religion going back to who knows when, same as Irish paganism. But their revival in earnest have started about 300 years ago. So their neo-paganism is a lot older than Irish neo-paganism. Because effectively, really, you're talking about the 1980s here, really, pretty much. You could argue that, like, okay, what about the Celtic Twilight? But that wasn't 100% pagan.
Mainly literature.
That was a lot of literature. They were esoteric kind of practitioners, but most of them weren't overtly pagan. They were more occultist rather than necessarily pagan. Like someone like Yeats is kind of tipping into paganism, but not 100%. There were one or two people, and then you could have sort of a bit of a gap. The last of is it P.W. Bowden? He's from actually here, from this part of the country. One of the last of those people, in like George Russell and whatever. And once they all died off, you kind of a bit of a gap, and then you've got this Wicca revival that happened in the UK in the 50s, which didn't really come here till the 70s. So you've got a bit of a strange situation that really you've got a pagan revival that sort of was originally a sort of Celtic revival, and then that mutated into a pagan revival around early 70s. I suppose who kick-started that was actually, strangely, two English people who moved here.
Janet and Stuart Farr.
Yeah, exactly, yeah. And that's continued on with, he's obviously, Stuart's gone now, and you have Janet and Gavin, who are sort of carrying on that same work. Although neither of them are like young people anymore.
She's in her 70s now, is she?
Probably,
yeah.
I'm not really sure.
Not really older, it's
I don't know. It's not. I don't normally ask people questions like that.
Very hard.
Yeah, but they very much, whether people want to admit it or not, or like it. Some people like it, more sort of nationalistic people would be like, and their nose put out of joint, the fact of foreigners kick-starting a sort of an Irish kind of cultural revival in terms of bring back paganism. Of course, that was Wicca, which isn't Irish, but I think what it did is it sort of woke something up, in that people thought, well, Wicca's all very well and good, but people are aware that it isn't Irish, and it might have reference to some Irish festivals in it, but I think people thought, well, maybe maybe we need like our own version rather than just going with Wicca. So you've got sort of, there's now this Celtic Wicca, which is like Wicca plus with a load of Irish or Welsh stuff added into it. And then you've got like the actual Druid revival itself. And then the shamanism. Because I know a lot of people have gone off and studied what they call core shamanism now, and then come back to Ireland and adapted that into an Irish context through looking at the historical kind of Druidic and shamanic practices, what we know about them, and then trying to reconstruct that into a working sort of modern Irish path. So it's kind of like a hybrid, really. You'd have to say, like people like Martin Duffy up in Dundee and Karen Ward and John Cantwell. They're both two groups of people that have sort of become very established in shamanism here, and they've come from a sort of a core shamanism, if you like, and then they've adapted it to sort of revive Ireland's sort of ancient practices. Again, it's sort of it's an adaptation, it's an update. It's not the same as what would have happened in the past, because we don't know how people did these things. And
it's going to go to sun now.
It's all right. Well, it's nice to have a bit of sun for a change, isn't it? So I say that is a challenge of trying to like revive something that's been basically snuffed out for a long time, and trying to do it in an authentic way. Because I mean, you know yourself, people argue, toss over how everything should be done and what this means that and this means that and whatever, and no it doesn't, and everyone's like ready to kill each other over sort of dogma. But one thing I noticed about going back to Shinto, there's a sort of maturity of the Japanese sort of indigenous paganism. They seem to have got over themselves. They're not sitting there sort of bashing the shit out of each other, like having these sort of altercations all the time, which I see a lot in pardon me, which I see a lot in the modern Irish pagan movement, and it kind of makes me quite sad, really. It's kind of both funny and tragic at the same time. I'm just thinking, well, is there that much need for such sort of vitriol and anger and slaggings that go on, and people fighting over minutiae? It always reminds me of Life of Brian, the People's the People's Front of Judea and the Popular Front of Judea and the Judean People's Front. There's a whole bunch of them, wasn't there, in that film? And I'm just thinking, right, we all want to do the same thing. We want paganism to grow. We want it to be available to people. We want people to get something out of their practice and enjoy it and feel fulfilled and spiritually enlightened and sort of spiritual sort of succor and strength and all that people want from religious and spiritual experiences. But maybe we could do it better. Maybe we could do it less sort of competitively, less sort of self-destructively. I'd say the modern pagan movement is quite self-destructive at times. And I looked at what was going on in Japan. I just thought, wow, this is great. This is really mature. And maybe they've had that extra time. They've had 300 years to sort their stuff out. Whereas we're like, 1970 odd, 72, I think the pharaohs come here, to where we're at now.
25.
That's about, what's that, 55 years?
55 years.
Roughly, more or less, something like that. That's not very long. And I think we're in danger of actually wrecking everything by commercialization and sort of this sort of fragmentation, to the extent that everyone's arguing to toss over minutiae, and people not being supportive to each other. You see different little groupings attacking each other and all this stuff, and it's just like, oh, come on, grow up a bit. You know, it's just no need for this stuff. Do you see like Buddhists going to war with each other over some small little thing? Makes me think of Jonathan Swift and the two islands.
Yeah.
Which end of the egg do you open? Is it the pointy end or the roundy end? And there's a triviality of some of this kind of like conflicts you see in the pagan community. It just make me despair sometimes. And just think, why is it really necessary? Do we have to go down this route? Can we not just be more compassionate, be like a bit more live and let live attitude? I mean, for something that's so young, it's still in its infancy. I'm kind of dismayed to see sort of the level of sort of conflict and fragmentation that we already have in it. I know some people be like, oh, you can't say that, but like that is the reality from what I've seen from being here for 25 years. And I just think we could make some attempts to be a bit more unified, like you have different organizations that ignore each other, that pretend that the other one doesn't exist, kind of thing. I mean, how is that helping this country? How is it helping the Irish pagan movement when you've got different factions that ignore each other completely as if they didn't exist? Maybe they should be working together rather than and put their differences aside and say, okay, we're in camp A and you're in camp B, but does that mean we have to like diss each other? No, you don't have to do that. You could just do your thing, but acknowledge you both exist and that you're both trying to achieve something good. So I would think people need to put the pagan community ahead of their own individual and personal and sort of niche group interests that they have. Okay, you can still have your interests, your little agenda, but there's a bigger agenda, which is the pagan community itself, and actually trying to grow that and help people who are interested in paganism, and maybe put these petty squabbles aside and just try and be a bit more mature. Again, like I was saying, we could learn from Poland about cultural revival, maybe in terms of actually running a spirituality or a religion or whatever. We could learn something from the Japanese and Shinto and how that has re-established itself over, from having been gone completely because of Buddhism, more or less gone. It had this huge revival 300 years ago, and now it's sort of there very much sort of as part of the mainstream, alongside Buddhism and whatever other religions. So I think if we don't manage to do that and grow up and be more mature as a actual sort of movement, then I think people will just walk away from it. If they come to paganism and say, oh, they're all just busy like fighting each other, they'll go, well, maybe I'll go and become a Buddhist instead or something else, and that's a failure. If people involved in paganism now, who are like the elders, if you like, can't actually kind of move things forward in a way that ordinary people can relate to and want to be part of, then we've failed and we've let down future generations if we can't find a way forward that's more kind of holistic and more united and less divisive.
Druidry and ecology. How does Druidry align with ecological and environmental concerns in the modern world?
Oh, I would say very much so. I think that's a really key part of the modern Druid movement. Whether it was originally, I can't really say, but obviously we know for sure that there was a big interest in trees in ancient Ireland, and they're considered very important, very valuable. So I think because of that, that's kind of instantly created this sort of attachment to the nature and the environment in the modern context. So okay, the Druids are into trees and preserving them and whatever. Although actually, interestingly, you know, the ancient kind of clans weren't opposed to going and chopping down people's bile bua, you know, oh, we hate the, you know, those, the Sweeneys down the road or the McCarthy's, let's go and chop down their sacred tree and that will really stick it to them. They did that kind of stuff, but obviously within their own context, they you know, they'd have revere a tree and they planted more trees, and they managed the woodlands, although actually a lot of central Ireland was cleared before the Normans and the Elizabethans finished off the job. So I would say the original Druidic kind of concept about the ecology and managing wildlife and woodland was somewhat different from what we have now, where it's very much a specific thing of trying to preserve what's left of the modern world, of the natural world, I mean, in the modern times. And we still have like pathetic tree cover in Ireland, and I think something that's like 1 or 2% of what's here is actual broadleaf and native species. I mean, Storm Owen recently has just wiped out masses of conifer plantations, which are, you know, quilcher spruce, which are no good to anything. They're only one good use, and that's to make toilet rolls and telegraph poles. They're absolutely a disaster for the natural species. The indigenous species here do not benefit at all from any of these quilcher plantations. But I mean, there is supposed to be a move towards native species and planting broadleafs and everything. Personally, I think that's really important. When in Wexford, I planted 2 like groves of Irish only species. They're quite small. Here again, I've planted another one in the land here, and you know, I've done a lot of work for people as a gardener, planting orchards and woodlands and stuff. So I planted I probably planted 5,000 trees or more in my lifetime, which I think is pretty good going. So I would say a lot of people at least like the idea of environmentalism within a Druid context. It's considered important. How well everyone actually fulfills that actual motivation to do something for the environment is another matter. I think a lot of people like the idea of it, but not everybody really kind of puts that much effort in, I would say. Obviously people have different circumstances. I've been fortunate, partly because I'm trained as a horticulturist and I've worked in the industry. I've had opportunities to go and plant lots of trees. Whereas say you live in an urban environment and you don't know anything about plants and how to plant them and care for them, it's probably a bit more difficult to go and do that. And again, like, I mean, I live in an off-grid house. I'm very, very careful with what I spend my money on. I generally buy most things second-hand. I don't buy second-hand underwear or second-hand toilet paper, but pretty much everything else in my life is probably second-hand. Like,
yeah, well, yeah, let's reuse the toilet paper.
I might buy the recycled, but like that doesn't always go down as well as like the nice, you know, you talk to your family member who's visiting and they go, oh, don't like your toilet paper, it's too recycled. Can I have the kitten soft, please? You go, no, sorry, we don't have that. Whatever, you know, but I'm only being silly really, but the point is like, for me personally, it's important to actually live this stuff for real. That I say I care about the environment. If I'm a Druid and that's what I profess to believe, then that means I actually have to do something. I can't just waffle on about it and not do anything. That's basically what you call hypocrisy, when you know what comes out in the mouth and what the hands and feet are doing are completely different. I suppose the American term would be walk your talk, wouldn't it?
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I'd be very big into walking your talk and actually, you know, if you care, then do something. So I think, you know, there are people I know in the Druid part who are like me, and they're really trying to do something practical and proactive. And then you have other people who just pay lip service to it, and you know, they say the right words, and they, you know, they wear the right clothes, and they look the part, but they're not actually doing anything. So I'm thinking, well, all the talk and the spiel and the looking good is irrelevant if you're not actually doing anything to help. I mean, this country's terrible. We've got like fluoride in the water, we've got really polluted rivers, the land is full of glyphosate. Sure, we're full of glyphosate. If you eat bread, then you're full of glyphosate, because I think the glyphosate contamination in Irish flour is like some of the worst in the world, you know. Yeah, we've got a terrible water system here that's not being fixed, full of leaks and bad reservoirs and not enough of them. You know, so for this, up until last year you were allowed to burn gorse, and it's still happening illegally now, and all this cutting hedges and not allowing enough time for birds to like reproduce properly, and you know, they just get hacked, their nests hacked to pieces. Sort of monocultures, like I said already about the trees, and then like you know, the way farming is done, very backwards farming methodologies. That's a lot of us down to Chuggas and the way they teach farmers. There's so many environmental problems in this country, and you know, Ireland's got this green image, but we're not very, very green at all, to be honest. I think the only thing that's saving this country from like disaster really is the fact there's a very low population, so the human impact is less because of the small volume of people. If you know, if we had the same kind of density as population as say the Netherlands, this country would be so polluted and so like unlivable, because you know, we're not very progressive in our care or stewardship of the land. And I suppose all you can really do is try and lead by example, and that's what I'm trying to do, you know, trying to be non-consumer, to minimalize my impact, be self-sufficient as much as possible, and to actually go out and proactively try and improve the environment. Like here, the grass isn't cut. I've actually sown wildflowers, collected seeds and bought seeds as well, and just gathered them all. And you know, we have a lot of birds here because you know, there's places for them to nest, and there's no chemicals on the land. There's pheasants come here as well, even a young fox that comes here, probably looking to eat the pheasant. And you know, lots and lots of butterflies in the summer, because like this isn't a monoculture. You go and you look at some of the gardens around here, and like, okay, they're not into Druid stuff or whatever, but you know, the typical Irish house, you've got like this house in the middle of a big driveway that's probably way bigger than is needed, can fit like 20 cars in the drive, even though you've got 2 cars, and then around that there's a lawn with like, if you're lucky, like half a dozen shrubs in it, and then a wooden fence or maybe a hedge. So you know, there's a lot of like,
and nomad sheep.
Yeah. You've got like 6 species in the entire garden in some cases, or not even that, where some people just have grass and that's it. one species of grass in their lawn, which is mowed to death. You know, how is that of any benefit to the environment, the wildlife? It's none whatsoever. It might as well be concreted for all the good it's done. So, you know, part of what I try to teach when I do teaching with horticulture or in Druidism is to like change people's perspective about engagement with the natural world. That, you know, whatever space you've got, you can have it like as a sterile wasteland, or you can transform it into somewhere that nature can prosper and live and thrive, which is what I'm trying to do, and I encourage other people to do that too. I mean, you don't need to have a huge space. If you've got a tiny garden, you could still transform it into like a haven for wildlife. It's not that hard, you know. You really just need the will to do it and a little bit of time, more than anything.
Global influence. How do you feel Irish paganism influences or differs from other pagan traditions?
That's a difficult one to answer, really, because you know, my knowledge of other parts is a little bit limited. I do know a little bit about Wicca. I know a little bit about Norse paganism. I know a little bit about Shinto. I know a fair bit about Hinduism, Vedic culture. But, you know, that's compared to what I know about Druidism, that would be like pretty small. So I can only like make an assessment that based on my limited knowledge, personal knowledge. But I would say like Ireland, it has a very big footprint for such a small country. It's sort of, you could say, what's the expression, punching above its weight, you could say. But then there's a massive diaspora. Ireland's got this incredibly huge diaspora all over the world. So, you know, places where you wouldn't expect, there you'll find Irish people and Irish culture. You know, somewhere like Argentina's got a massive Irish population. Because back in, you know, the early 1900s and whatever, and before that, it was one of the richest countries in the world. So it was like a go-to country. So a lot of Irish people emigrated to Argentina, and their descendants are still there. So in South America, you've interest in Irish paganism. Also, Wicca is very popular in South America as well. But yeah, it's popular all over the world, really. So I mean, it has a huge impact. Places like the Netherlands, even like Germany, where they've got their own traditions, Slavic and Germanic culture. You know, there's a lot of interest there too. Actually, funny thing, years ago I used to be, you know, a sort of electronic sort of alternative music I used to make. I went on tours, including a few in Germany, and I remember being at this place in the middle of nowhere, and I had done the sound check, I had a load of time to kill. So I went for a walk in the woods, and I'm walking for, God knows, I don't know, good 10 minutes at least. And then I came to a clearing in the forest, and there was an Irish pub in the middle of the fucking clearing. So of course I had to go in and had a pint. But I just thought it was really funny. This is really literally the back of beyond, the arsehole of nowhere. And, you know, so I mean the forest is even more, you know, remote. So, yeah, you know, only the Germans could do something like that, really. They're quite funny. I can remember going to this nightclub where they built a river, a purple river, you know, had fluorescent lights, and they put purple dye in the river. So it was like pumped underground and back round, and then running through the nightclub with a bridge over it. you know, same kind of crazy thinking. Oh, we're just going to do this.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, you know, I wonder how many customers that pub actually had when you consider where it was, right in the middle of nowhere. Anyway, it was there, and it, you know, it was nicely done actually. It was quite, you know, it looked like a proper Irish pub. But I think I was the only person in there actually, because it was like, I suppose, too early for like, you know, nighttime drinking.
Mm-hmm.
But I just thought it was so bizarre that someone made this Irish pub in the middle of nowhere. I know that's got nothing to do with paganism, but it just illustrates the point that there's a fascination a lot of people have with Ireland and Irish culture, that they'll do crazy stuff like this. So I'd say, you know, the native Irish spirituality, you know, there's a lot of interest in that, perhaps way beyond what you'd expect for such a small country.
Are there any upcoming books, projects or events you're particularly excited about?
Well, yes, actually. I have a new book coming out, which is something I've been working on for about 3 years, so it's been quite a difficult project, really. And it's a little bit of a departure for me, and it's like moved into less familiar territory. So it's about Scotia, who you probably know about her.
Yeah, the wife of Don, and she perished while fighting the Tuatha Dé up in Sliamish. Her ground is supposed to be out in Tree.
Yeah, it's sort of the foothills of this Sliamish range, so you're sort of just getting into the bottom of it, where her grave is. So yeah, that makes sense. You probably wouldn't be fighting right up in the mountains.
No.
But so it's never been excavated, and that's something that's obviously linked back to Egypt. And you know, that was the hard part for me, because looking into the whole Egypt angle of it, I'm not an Egyptologist or an archaeologist. I've had a lot of help actually, which has been brilliant, to sort of research this and put this together. So, and again with Spain, I don't really speak any Spanish. I had to get a few people to help me with that.
Rowan's Tower.
Yeah, exactly. And there's a whole lot in Spain that has been largely overlooked. So it was it's ended up being like a detective story, and for me, like trying to get all my ducks in a row with that was quite hard, because obviously I'm comfortable with Irish history and the pagan culture and all that is what I've written about that a lot in the past, so I'm more comfortable with that, whereas Egypt, Spain, not so comfortable. So that was a real leap for me to move into that sort of area. But I think the challenge actually was really good for me, and I'm very happy with how it's turned out in the end. So I'm quite excited about that, and it's perhaps a bit more of a mainstream book, because it would Scotia has a real name. I would suggest is Mary Taton, and she is the older sister of Tutankhamun, daughter of Akhenaten and Nefertiti. So I go into that whole story quite a lot. So that was quite challenging to do that. But yeah, I think it's something that's a lot more people might be interested in because of the Egyptian angle. And a lot of people have dismissed the idea that she could have actually come all that way here, but I say there's tremendous evidence suggests that international travel was a lot more sophisticated than people believe.
And there was a lot of Bronze Age artwork that actually did travel from Ireland down to the Mediterranean.
Yeah, and also like just basic things like amber and tin and copper coming from Britain and Ireland, and even as far away as Norway. I mean, ending up in Egypt, Israel, whatever, you know. So there's a sort of compartmentalization to a large extent, or people did this for that reason and only that, and oh yeah, there may have been trade, but no, people wouldn't have gone and saying why, if people could go on a sort of commercial voyage to go and collect the stuff, then why wouldn't they, you know, why dismiss the possibility of cultural connections or sort of emigration even, which is effectively what we're talking about, the ancient outflow of Egyptians. We don't know how many, to firstly sort of across to Spain and then Scotland and Ireland. And it's interesting that DNA research has actually thrown up a lot of interesting information. Ultimately, it would be great if that grave site was excavated and see if there's a body there. But there doesn't seem to be much interest in doing that. It is a very difficult place to get to. It's very inaccessible. You couldn't drive even close to it. You're talking 30-40 minute walk across mud and footbridges, which are like really super narrow. They're like literally like that, the footbridges. They're so narrow. So yeah, it's not really handy. You'd really want a helicopter to drop in your stuff, ideally.
I've got stuck in enough bogs already.
Yeah, so it's definitely a very interesting site, and I won't go on about it, but obviously there's some information in the book there about things at that site which have kind of been overlooked or not even seen before. I don't really much other stuff planned for the moment, really. A lot of work on the land here, more tree planting, and also I haven't been living in this particular area of Kerry for that long, so there's a lot of places I want to go visit that I haven't had the time to, because I did a lot of building work, and then, you know, still working on the garden. So as that work gets completed, I'd like to spend more time visiting some of the parts of Kerry that I haven't explored yet, or revisit some of the sites I've already been to but didn't have as long as I would have liked, you know. But yeah, I suppose that new book is the most exciting thing for me at the moment, and you know, the magazine as well is obviously something that I'm going to continue working on. So that's been really interesting, and I think it's a kind of a combination of frustration and like enjoyment, because it can be really difficult at times, and then when it all comes together, you're like, yes, that's great, this is going to be a really good issue. And like the new one coming out soon, that's been quite challenging to get it together, and then in the end it worked out really good, and I'm really happy with it. But you know, initially I was like, oh, this is going to be a tough one. So you know, it's great when things do work out and you get the end product of what you've been working on is you're really happy with, but sometimes in that process it can be challenging. So that's kind of exciting in a way, but not always a nice exciting, because you want things to run smoothly and easily to a large extent, but sometimes when it's tough, you actually end up with a better result. That you're kind of pushed and challenged a bit, can actually end up with something better as a result, even though it's like, I suppose that natural inclination towards laziness and inertia that I have, and I don't want to make loads of extra effort to do something, but sometimes when I'm forced to make that extra effort, it ends up being better as a result. It just sometimes needs a bit of a nudge and a push to take it that bit further. And then I never regret having to work harder when it turns out better. I'm actually glad that I did that, but initially I'm like, oh God, I've got to do all this extra work or whatever, and I'm like, don't want to have to do it. But I suppose, like anything, if you don't put effort into things, you're not going to get good results. That's life, isn't it? You have to, what you want out of life, what you want out of any project, the more you put into it, the more you're going to get back in the end. No? So, put all the stuff that won't grow in the horrible wet climate lives in the polytunnel.
And you have your own, is that your own
beds there?
Yeah. Is that your own generator?
Oh, the windmill, yeah. And there's the solar panels over here. And then behind the panels is where our mini Druid growing is. So a lot of trees already around the perimeter. This is an orchard, mostly apple trees. Down here is where our lip grove is. It looks like just a bunch of sticks at the moment, but eventually this will grow up into like a nice area which will run back that way along here. And I've got to get a stone in the middle, which I haven't managed yet. This is just a marker for where it's going. So yeah, it's a work in progress, but give it a few years and it should be pretty good. Once they get established, it takes about 3 years for bare root trees to get established, and then they just go for it then. So yeah, it's really nice. I'm very lucky to be able to have my own space that I can do this. So yeah, this is like the third time I've done this. So I guess you just do it, just a matter of waiting, really. I mean, I can use it already, but it's still very much in its infancy. So yeah, once I've got a nice stone to replace the stick, it'll be pretty much complete then. That's going to be a bit of a nightmare, because I remember having to do something before. I had 5 stones and actually having to roll them end to end. That took quite a lot of effort.
That would take a lot of effort,
yeah. So I'm going to have to do that again with one. It's going to have to be, it's probably about 200 or 300 meters. It's got to be rolled from the gate down there all the way up here. It's going to be a bit of hard work.
It is. You're going to need help for that one?
You can't get a truck to up here with.
No.
But look, maybe I can get a couple of lads to help me with that one. Hopefully. Alright.
Thanks a million, Luke, for inviting me to your home and for this interview.
Thanks for having me.
There will be links to the website for Irish Pagan Magazine, and for any parents want to look at on any publications by Luke as well. you can just copy and paste them from the description. So, míle buíochas as for Ó Tuama agus Irish slán go fóill.